No one noticed anything wrong at first. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. The lights were off, curtains drawn, the bathroom door closed like it always was. When the paramedics arrived, they moved with quiet efficiency, voices low, steps careful. They had seen this before, too many times. A woman, mid-20s, found in her bathtub. Slipped, hit her head, drowned. That was the story. And for almost 2 weeks, everyone believed it. Lydia Cole was careful with her life. She planned meals. She paid bills early. She kept lists on her phone, on sticky notes, sometimes written neatly in a small blue notebook she carried everywhere. Friends teased her about it, but Lydia laughed. Lists made her feel in control. She had moved into the apartment a year earlier, a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet building. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, close to work, and hers. Evan lived there too, though not officially. He had started staying over just a few nights a week, which slowly became most nights, and then almost all of them. His toothbrush appeared beside hers. His shoes lined up by the door. His voice filled the space. From the outside, they looked stable, happy, even. But happiness, when watched closely, can be carefully rehearsed. Evan was charming in a way that didn't draw attention. He didn't dominate conversations. He blended into them. He remembered details. He listened just long enough to seem invested. Lydia's friends liked him at first, but there were moments, small ones. He answered her phone once, then laughed it off. He questioned why she needed to go out so often. He disliked certain friends without clear reasons. Lydia noticed. She always noticed. She wrote it down. The night Lydia died began quietly. No neighbors reported shouting. No loud music, no crash, just water running. Later, Evan would tell police they had argued earlier, but nothing serious. Just stress, work, money, life. He said he went to bed first. He said he woke up and found her in the tub. He said everything right. When the police arrived, the bathroom looked intentional. The tub was filled to a moderate level. Lydia lay inside at an angle that suggested a fall. One arm rested along the tub's edge. Her hair spread into the water like it had simply drifted there. The floor was dry, too dry, but no one said it aloud yet. The officer wrote accidental drowning on his preliminary notes. Evan stood nearby, pale, quiet, cooperative. He cried at the right moments. What Evan didn't know, what he could not have known, was that Lydia had sent a message the night before. Not dramatic, not a goodbye, just a text to her friend Maya. If something ever happens to me, please don't just accept the first answer. Maya read it after Lydia's death and couldn't stop rereading it. The autopsy did not scream murder. No obvious signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No dramatic injuries. The cause of death aligned with drowning. But there were inconsistencies. Water in places it shouldn't be. Marks that didn't quite match a slip. And timing that felt off. The autopsy did not scream murder. No obvious signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No dramatic injuries. The cause of death aligned with drowning. But there were inconsistencies. Water in places it shouldn't be. Marks that didn't quite match a slip. And timing that felt off. Evan cleaned the apartment the next morning. Not frantically. Carefully. He wiped surfaces, laundered towels, took out the trash. He explained later that cleaning helped him cope. Grief makes people do strange things, he said. Investigators wrote it down, but they remembered it. Lydia's notebook was missing, so was her phone. Evan said he didn't know where they were. The first real crack came from water. Not the bathtub but the pipes. A maintenance worker mentioned that the building's water pressure dropped unusually late that night. The system log showed extended usage from one unit. Lydia's, 4 hours, too long for a bath. Detectives returned to the apartment. They asked Evan to walk them through the night again. His story didn't change, but his timing did. Minutes shifted, details blurred. People who tell the truth remember moments. People who lie remember scripts. Then they found the towel. Not in the bathroom. In the trash chute. Bleached, overwashed, fibers damaged. It matched the set Lydia owned, and it had been used recently. The theory formed quietly. Not shouted, not announced. Lydia had not fallen. She had been attacked elsewhere. The bathtub was not the scene of death, it was the stage. When Evan was brought in for a second interview, he seemed confident. Too confident. He corrected detectives before they finished questions. He offered explanations no one asked for. He said, "I loved her," over and over. The missing phone turned up weeks later, in a drainage canal miles away. Damaged but not destroyed, some messages were recoverable, including one unsent draft. It read, "He scares me when he's calm." At trial, the prosecution never showed graphic images. They didn't need to. They showed patterns. Control, isolation, planning. They showed how Evan had filled the tub after Lydia was already gone, how he positioned her, how he wiped away traces and trusted water to erase what he couldn't. They showed how he assumed no one would question a quiet woman found alone. Evan never confessed. He maintained the story until the end. Accident, tragedy, bad luck, but the jury listened to the notebook pages reconstructed from memory, to the friends who noticed changes, to the water logs and cleaning patterns. And they understood something simple: accidents don't require erasing. The verdict came back guilty. Second-degree murder, no outburst, no collapse. Evan simply closed his eyes, as if finally tired of pretending. Lydia's story didn't end in the bathtub. It lived on in policies changed, in friends who learned to trust discomfort, in investigators who stopped assuming silence meant peace, and in one message that proved fatal lies don't always vanish, even in still water. The verdict did not bring relief, not the kind people imagine. There was no rush of closure, no sudden lightness. Lydia's parents sat still as the word guilty echoed through the courtroom. Her mother didn't cry. She stared straight ahead, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. Because knowing the truth did not return a daughter. It only confirmed what Lydia had tried to warn them about quietly, carefully, too late. After the trial, investigators reviewed the case again, not because they needed to, but because it disturbed them. The bathroom scene had been convincing, too convincing. The lack of chaos had worked in Evan's favor at first. There were no broken fixtures, no overturned shelves, no visible struggle. Everything looked calm. And calm scenes make people careless. One detective admitted later that if Lydia had been less organized, less predictable, the case might never have reopened. "It was the absence of mess that fooled us," he said. "We expect violence to look violent." What had actually happened unfolded slowly in testimony. On the night Lydia died, she had planned to leave. Not permanently, at least not yet, but she had packed a bag. Just essentials, clothes, documents, the blue notebook. She waited until Evan finished dinner, until his mood softened. She had learned the timing mattered. She told him she needed space. Witnesses would later say Evan hated that word, space. It suggested freedom. The argument did not escalate loudly. That was another misconception. There were no neighbors pounding on walls, no shouting matches recorded on phones. Evan did not explode. He went quiet. And Lydia knew that silence. It meant calculation. Investigators pieced together the sequence not from eyewitnesses but from behavior. Evan didn't call for help immediately, not because he panicked. Because he planned, he waited, he thought. He cleaned, he staged. The bathtub wasn't chosen randomly. It was practical. Water masked inconsistencies. It softened timelines. It created a story people recognized: tragic, mundane, believable. Slips happen, especially to women, especially at home, especially alone. Evan relied on assumptions as much as he relied on bleach. When forensic specialists re-examined the tub weeks later, they noticed something subtle. The waterline residue didn't match the position of Lydia's body. It suggested she had been placed after the tub filled, not during. A detail invisible to grief, impossible to unsee once noticed. During the trial, Evan's defense argued coincidence. That Lydia was clumsy, that stress made her careless. That Evan cleaned because he was devastated. They suggested Lydia's friends were projecting guilt where none existed. They suggested the notebook never existed, but one friend testified quietly. "She wrote everything down," Maya said, "even grocery lists." The notebook didn't disappear by accident. The prosecution never described the moment Lydia died. They didn't need to. Instead, they asked the jury to imagine the planning afterward, the patience, the restraint, the willingness to touch, move, and pose someone you claimed to love. That, they argued, was the violence. Evan's internet history sealed what evidence alone could not. Searches made days before. How long before water damage shows? Can drowning be accidental without struggle? How to clean bathroom for inspection? He said it was curiosity. The jury did not believe him. In prison, Evan told other inmates a different version. That Lydia was dramatic, that she overreacted. That things got out of hand. Even behind bars, he avoided responsibility. Even there, he framed himself as misunderstood. Lydia's parents donated her belongings to a women's shelter, except one thing. The reconstructed notebook. They kept that. Each page rewritten from memory by friends, co-workers, family pieces stitched together into something incomplete but powerful. Proof that Lydia had been paying attention. Years later, the case would be taught in criminal psychology courses. Not as a crime of passion, but as a crime of control. The danger of calm perpetrators. The risk of believing clean scenes. The lesson that evidence erased too carefully often leaves deeper marks. A detective once said something after the case closed. Water doesn't wash away intent, it just delays it. Lydia's story became a reminder whispered among investigators. If a story feels to need look again. If someone cleans to thoroughly ask why, if the victim warned you believe them. The apartment was eventually rented again. Fresh paint, new fixtures, no trace of lavender cleaner. No one bathing there knew the story, but somewhere beneath the tiles, beneath the pipes, beneath the assumptions that once protected a killer, the truth had already settled, and this time, it stayed. Years after Evan's conviction, Lydia's name still appeared in quiet places. Not headlines, footnotes, policy reviews, training manuals, internal memos. Her case became a reference point whenever investigators debated whether a scene felt too orderly. When a report relied too heavily on what looked calm instead of what felt wrong. New detectives were taught to pause when a narrative arrived fully formed, when every detail lined up too cleanly, too quickly, because truth rarely does. Maya never returned to the apartment building. She avoided the street entirely, choosing longer routes if necessary. Some places don't need memorials, memory does the work on its own. But she kept one habit Lydia had taught her. Writing things down, when conversations felt strange. When silences lingered too long. When someone's calm felt heavier than anger. It wasn't paranoia, it was awareness. Lydia's parents aged quietly. They attended advocacy events at first, spoke at panels, sat behind microphones with folded hands. But eventually, the talking exhausted them. What remained was routine, gardening, church on Sundays. Long walks where they didn't need to speak. They never said Lydia's name less, they said it differently. Inside prison, Evan's story never evolved. It stayed stuck at accident. Even as years passed, even as cellmates came and went, he repeated the same language, detached, minimized, careful. He avoided the word choice. He avoided the word control. Counselors noted it. Denial wasn't his shield, control was. A criminologist once described Evan in a lecture without naming him. He wasn't loud, she said. He wasn't impulsive. He didn't lose control, he exercised it. Students shifted in their seats. Because those offenders are harder to spot. They don't raise alarms, they lower them. Lydia's reconstructed notebook was eventually digitized. Each page scanned, each handwriting style tagged. Each memory preserved without interpretation. It wasn't published publicly, it didn't need to be. Its existence alone mattered. Proof that a woman noticed patterns before anyone else did, and that noticing was not paranoia, weakness, or exaggeration. It was evidence. Sometimes, investigators revisiting old cases referenced Lydia's. Not aloud. Just a look, a pause. A second review of water usage logs, cleaning patterns, phone silences. Cases reopened quietly don't make the news, but they change outcomes. The bathroom, the one that once convinced everyone, became ordinary again. Someone else's shampoo, someone else's towel, someone else's laughter echoing down the hallway. And that was the point. Justice wasn't preserving the space. It was preventing repetition. In one seminar, a young detective asked a question that lingered. How do we know when calm is dangerous? The instructor didn't answer immediately. Then said, when calm requires explanation. Lydia's story ended where it began. Not with violence, but with attention. To detail, to behavior, Two warnings, whispered instead of shouted. And because of that, the still water never stayed silent again.